Babysitters of Reddit, what's your demon child story? I babysat for a few families on my street as a preteen teen. Word of mouth spread and a family maybe 6 streets away asked me to watch 3 kids. 3 kids seemed like a lot for not knowing them. But they said they'd only be gone a few hours. Parents leave. Kids turn into demon spawn. 2 little boys and 1 youngest child girl. They tormented her until she was literally hiding, clinging to my legs and clothes. I turned on a movie and they were okay for a minute. Then one boy gets up and pulls his pants down and literally just starts pissing in the middle of the living room. He's totally potty trained. Like 6. I freak out and start to clean it up and send the boy to his room. The other brother followed him, as they shared a room, and just sat there with him. The girl sneaks downstairs throughout all this and unbeknownst to me starts making an F5 grade mess. After I clean the pee, I go to get them out of the boy's room. Surprise. Door is closed. Oh. And apparently locked. The one boy is only like 3 and is crying because he can't open it and his brother won't let him out. The older boy is defiant and just screaming at me, "No, I'm not opening it. You're not my mom. I want my mommy." We had a standoff for a few minutes before I realized the girl was gone. Well, I wasn't getting the boys out. So I went to get the phone and call the parents while I tried to find the girl. She pulled out all the freaking toys and they were everywhere and I couldn't find her because she was like in a pillow pile somewhere. I don't really have an ending to the story. But needless to say, I was pretty much in tears by the time they came home. One of them drove me home and kept apologizing and hoped I'd still give them another chance. That did not happen. Haha, this almost does sound like the other story. Maybe that's why I'm scared to have little boys. Also, this was probably 15 plus years ago. I was maybe 14. I didn't have the mental capacity to know what to do or how to handle any of this. And yeah, I was paid probably $5-7 an hour. It was awful and scarred me from babysitting for a while. I had a kid who climbed out his bedroom onto the roof of the house and started the house on fire. The kid was a demon. He was 9 at the time. Holy frick. Were you there when it happened? Yes. I called the fire department and got all 3 kids out of the house. Luckily, the fire station was a few blocks away, so they were there and put it out before it really got going. Smoldering. I was about 16 at the time and was very much in demand as a babysitter. I was also no nonsense, which I made clear to parents. I was allowed to spank all of the kids if I needed to. This was the 60s. But this particular kid was beyond that. I lived on the block, 4 houses down, with my parents and 8 siblings. I continued to sit for them because they paid me a lot of money, especially after that, and couldn't get anyone else to do it. They eventually moved to a mansion in a very wealthy neighborhood because the dad was made VP of the company he worked for, and they still drove about 10 miles each way to get me to watch their kids. I'm still in touch with his sister who lives in Atlanta. I always thought he'd end up in prison, but surprisingly, he's a fireman. Kid threw an easy bake oven at me and then tried to lock me in a closet. This is way funnier than it should be. Friend babysat a kid with pica. Had to follow him around everywhere yelling, "No, don't eat that." Kind of like having a new puppy. Ended the night watching him chew on her flip-flop while it was on her foot. I just imagine her exhausted while the kid is chewing on her flip-flop like, I don't even care anymore. Yet that was pretty much it. She went there thinking, how bad can it be? So you keep him inside so he doesn't try to eat dirt. She got there and the kid tried to eat the inside of the house. So they went outside. Turns out all of outside was also considered edible. By the time the parents came home, she was sitting on the ground outside with him chewing on her flip-flop like, double quote, "Frick it. Poison yourself. Good luck, kid." I had one main family I regularly babysat for after college and they recommended me to a friend of theirs who had 2 girls. Both families were well off, but very different. Anyway, the second family's 2 girls were beyond spoiled. I mean, TV reality show spoiled. The youngest, who was 5, would blood curdle scream for a good 15 minutes running through this mansion house when it was time for bed. I always felt like an arsehole calling the mother, but they didn't pay me enough to put up with that bullshit. I'd have to set the girl up in the special room and rub her back while she fell asleep after she spoke to her mother. I sat for them 3 times and avoided their calls after that. Had a 5-year-old pull out a pocket knife on me and demand I give him my Pokemon cards. Also had a kid try to pry the kitchen window off because he wanted to see the kids I was watching that were inside. Drop kicks the kid into oblivion. You ain't getting your pleb fingers on my Charizard. BTCH. I had a kid go to the bathroom, poop, run out with no pants, no wiping, grab my house key, and throw it in the poop. While I fished it out, he sat on the couch rubbing his butt. I used every kind of soap on that key, and his parents got back. I waited to get paid. Then I explained things pointing to the spot on the couch and left. Good for you for not cleaning it. The parents popped the kid out. They should be forced to deal with what the kid pops out too. I had a kid who was literally the embodiment of Cartman from South Park. He fried his pet rat and tried to eat it. I wasn't there when it happened, but when his parents told me, I made sure to never see that devil again. My sister babysits our neighbor's daughter and she brought her to our house to visit our cute golden doodle puppy. Brady, the puppy, ran up to the girl in excitement, and she choked the crap out of him and tried to hold his head on the ground. I made the little devil cry. Stuck me with a needle too. See what I would do? Made painted rocks together. When we set them out to dry, they dropped mine in a bucket of water. Had a massive meltdown over 15 minutes on a street corner. When I walked the opposite direction, they wanted to go around the block to get to the park. Ended up carrying 2 of them. One on my hip and the other over my shoulder while the eldest followed. I am not a large person. Spoke rudely to me about me in my second language that I had only just begun learning and refused to respond to English, which they were fluent in. Spat in my food while they thought I wasn't looking. Got just so many things. Those kids were freaking terrors. Babysat 2 brothers. The younger proceeded to get into an argument with the older. It quickly escalated into the younger grabbing a kitchen knife and threatening the older brother with it. Babysat for a family with 3 boys when I was about 16. Had no problems with the older 2, but once when it was time for bed, the 6-year-old decided to start playing the drum set in their basement. I tried to convince him to put the drumsticks away and come upstairs. Cue him proceeding to hit me as hard as he could all over my arms as I tried to defend myself. You wouldn't think something a bit bigger than a pencil would hurt, but God was it painful. I was crying and convinced he'd broken at least a couple of my fingers when I managed to get one drumstick away, which led him to grab his iPod charging to call his dad, who was away for business, and tell him his babysitter was being mean. Eventually had to call his mother to yell at him through the phone because I was half a second away from calling the police on this kid or just walking home a few doors down. Don't think he ever fell asleep before his mom got back. And didn't even get paid extra to make up for my inability to write for the next couple weeks. My cousin babysat and told this one at dinner. She was babysitting 3 kids. And they were fine all evening until she tried to put them to bed. The older 2 were fine. But the youngest, 5, kept running out of his room and around the house. After the 3rd time of putting his to bed, she heard a noise from his room. She goes up and opens the door to see him standing in the corner, facing a wall. She tells him to get into bed, but he says, but he wants you to read us a bedtime story. She noped out of there very quickly. I worked for an emergency shelter for children who were taken away from their parents. Because of this, most of the kids were pretty messed up. One particular kid used to sh-tea on the floor in the gym and then find it, while the other kids were playing games in the gym. It was miraculous how fast he could make it happen and how slick he was. I would look away for a split second, and there it is. Every time he did it, gym time had to be moved outside and the gym would be closed for the rest of the day. I once watched 2 brothers while their parents went to the movies. The boys were around 5 and 6 and normally acted pretty nice. But shortly after their parents left, things got really weird. They asked me to come up to their playroom, then closed the door. They both started to play with some toys. But periodically they would turn around and start touching me inappropriately. I kept telling them to stop and that it was inappropriate. But they just laughed and would continue. I finally ran downstairs and ignored them while they jumped on furniture and threw shit at me. Their parents finally came home and gave me $100 for a 3-hour ordeal. They must know that their kids are evil little shits. I found out later that they killed their pet hamsters by throwing them into their ceiling fan at high speed. Frick those kids. I didn't really babysit much, but the time I babysat my cousins. One was a wee little one, so she slept in her crib. The 9-year-old however wanted to eat ice cream his mother had put in the freezer, but I didn't know the little beastard was lactose intolerant until he shit all in his pants and all over their couch. That day, I learned why babysitters ask for the kids' diets and allergies. Okay. I was the demon child in this one. Had a joint holiday with our neighbors and they got a local babysitter for me and a friend's daughter. We were as good as gold. Went to bed. No problem. I think she woke me up to tell me the babysitter was asleep in a chair in front of the TV. We decided to tie her up and managed to do it with as many rolls of toilet paper as we could find. She was basically mummified. As our parents opened the door, she woke up. All I know is that my parents were in hysterical laughter while this poor woman was in a panic trying to get free. I was babysitting 3 little nightmares. One of them would tear apart her dolls, then Frankenstein them Sid style, but add a touch of red paint along the glue lines, but that's a different story. Before the mom left me with her 3 demon spawn children, she told me the kids were allowed all the ice cream and candy and sugar they wanted, but that they should go to bed around 9:30ish. Hearing this, as soon as the mom left they went to town on the pantry. For the next 4 hours they would not calm down. They were breaking shit. They locked their kitten in one of the cabinets and I spent half an hour getting the poor thing out. They had a dead cat in the freezer and pulled it out to show it to me. Around 10:00 the youngest has passed out and I carried him to his bed and tucked him in. 1 down, 2 to go. Half an hour later the middle child has settled down in her room with her iPad just playing Minecraft. 2 down, 1 to go. The older sister is in the living room making one of her Barbie houseborn. This one had 8 extra long limbs and no face. I really didn't want to confront this child because she was kinda scary. When I do convince her to go to bed, she goes into the room she shares with her sister and yells to her sister, who was about 7, about how there was a monster in the house and that it was going to kill us all. Her sister flipping out and jumping through the open window and running to the road at around 10:45 at night. I freak out and jump out the window and run after her. I catch up to her just as a car is passing and all they see is me grabbing a little girl and dragging her into the forest. So yeah. That was the last time I ever babysat for them. Edit. I should probably add they had a dead cat in their freezer because someone shot it with an arrow and the police needed it for the investigation. Most of the kids I babysit are great, considering most kids act up around the babysitter just to see their reaction or see what they can get away with. I can handle that. Hell, I'm sure I did it to all my babysitters. This one kid though, he loved to torture me. He knew I always gave a good report to his parents. If they knew their kid was an asshole to me, they'd feel bad for me and stop asking me to babysit, and they always paid me well, so I definitely didn't want that. Cue the torture. One time he was in the tree fort and dropped through a kid's telescope in my head. It hurt so bad and I had a headache for days after it. Another time he closed my finger in a door. Right on the joint. It hurt so bad I really thought it was broken. This shit didn't happen often, and sometimes he was really nice and wanted to play board games and stuff. He's definitely better now that he's a little older. But I'm gonna give him shit for it when he's older and can understand that he was an arsehole child. Not a babysitter but a camp counselor. Most of my kids were lovely. I had kids from ages 6-16. One of the kids, Justin, was 12. But he was 6 feet tall. A bit annoying and sometimes didn't know when to stop a joke. But overall a nice kid. He got along really well with the younger kids. which sometimes looked odd because of how large he was. But in reality we realized he got along well with the younger kids because he had a mentally disabled little sister. One of the other 12-year-old girls didn't like Justin. She was a gossipy brat. Her little sister was also in the camp and had been hanging around Justin. She started making up rumors that Justin was hurting her little sister and that he was creepy and told her mom about it. Mom comes in and starts ranting about this other 12-year-old because her precious daughter told her things. And how she wants him kicked out of the camp. Luckily we knew this kid for years. And we're watching them constantly. We said we would monitor the situation. But no way in hell were we going to kick out a 12-year-old based on rumors that we knew this girl had started. This girl thought she was going to get what she wanted because her mom believed her. What she didn't know was that we took note of her own bad attitude. My wife babysat an 8-year-old autistic boy who attempted to drown his sister at the pool. Then he proceeded to attack my wife when she tried to stop him. He bit and bruised her before another woman at the pool, could get him settled down. And the boy's mother got home. He started crying and acting apologetic. His mother never punished him, so we've heard he continues to abuse his new babysitter. Bonus. He also regularly attacked the family dog and got him such frenzy they had to put him down. The dog. Not the psychopath child. I used to babysit this little girl for my dad's co-worker, and when I first got there she was sweet as could be. First big problem though. She didn't speak really any English. So we had a communication barrier, but she's a little kid anyway, so I thought I could handle it. Second big problem. She did not freaking get tired. Ever. At all. And the third and final problem. She was a spoiled turd who didn't like the word no. By the time her parents got home she had spent half the time yelling. Threw her toys at walls and me occasionally. Dumped my purse out and hid my stuff. Screamed at me whenever I went into the bathroom. And she locked my cell phone in a room that they didn't have a key for. When her parents got home they had to kick in the door to get my phone, and after being paid I basically ran out the door and went home to sleep because I was so mentally and physically exhausted. I only had to babysit her like 2 more times before they moved. Thank God. I was used to babysitting more than 1 kid at a time, and yet the child was almost too much to handle. Babysat for a family with 3 kids. I also cooked, did laundry, and picked up groceries for them off the clock. Oldest was about 5. And one day I caught him sitting on the middle child's chest, punching away at his face. I knew my punishments were very limited. So I grounded him to his bed with only books to amuse himself. For 5 minutes. I tended to the other 2 kids when I heard a small crashing noise. I check the bedroom. And see the boy has busted out the screen window and is now running naked across the lawn on his way to the 4-wheeler. He hopped on and got partially into the field behind the house. Note: he was not naked when I placed him in his room. I grounded him to the bed because he was spoiled as frick and didn't care about being grounded. Too many toys. I knocked on the mom's home office and got chastised for giving too harsh a punishment. Honestly, the worst kid I ever babysat was my brother. He has major anger issues and my mom was a single mom who worked full time, so by the time I was 10 I was alone with Hi. Before or after school till mom got home. After was the worst, as his meds would have worn off by then and he literally turned into a demon child. The threatened so many times to stab me that I hid all the knives. He once threw his skate at my back because I told him he couldn't sharpen his skates with a pumpkin carving knife. I actually used to call my mom so often at work because he was out of control and I was afraid of what he would do that she got told she wasn't allowed calls to work anymore or she would be fired. He's still a troublemaker to this day. Not as dangerous though. But the hardest part is he mainly only acted that way with me. So everyone knew I was exaggerating. My friend was an in-home pet sitter and had a gig over a long weekend. When she got to the house she found the dogs, along with their 2 preteen daughters that they neglected to inform my friend were also a part of the sitting gig. What the hell? I would have called the cops for child abandonment. I babysat 5 kids with a friend for several hours on a Saturday. One of the boys grabbed a knife from the kitchen and started chasing us all. We tried talking him down, but as 13 and 14-year-olds we couldn't do much. We all locked ourselves in the bathroom. The 4 children with us. He kept stabbing the door with the knife. This was back in 2003. Probably so cell phones weren't very prominent. I just happened to take my dad's work cell because he hardly used it. We called my friend's mom and she got him to give the knife to her. She took all the other knives home with her while we stayed with the kids the rest of the day till their parents came home. They delivered cookies to our house and the note in that boy's handwriting was to my mom and said, "Sorry for chasing your daughter with a knife." Kid's name. Good times. Babysat these 2 siblings from the time I was 10 to about 15. Great kids. Smart kids. Well-behaved kids. Parents moved. A few years later mom moved back with kids and had a new husband and needed a sitter. Great. Or not. She was now with someone else who had a kid. That kid was hellspawn. Now, I'm usually good with kids. Even back then. But this kid caused issues with the other kids. He destroyed stuff while laughing. He told me he could do what he wanted and wouldn't get punished. I got the feeling he wasn't lying either. I babysat like normal. Enforced house rules, etc. He squealed like a pig and claimed revenge. I was still a kid myself. So the mom took me home at the end of the night and asked what I thought of the kids. Told her honestly. Her kids were a little more wild than before she moved away. And the other kid was just mean and trying to start trouble. She paid me. But never asked me to sit again for the kids. I was fine with that. Cause that kid was a terror. I babysit a little girl and had to drive her home every day from school. She rode in her mom's front seat. So I figured she'd be fine in my front seat with me. And she was. Except for that one day. She grabbed my steering wheel. Throwing us off the road. The car flipped 6 times. Through a fence. And landed in someone's field. Her mom came and picked her up from the scene in her nice sports car. I left with an ambulance. A stretcher. And a neck brace. They didn't pay for anything and I still babysat her. Just at my house. Never drove her again.